Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. Thanks for coming along, thanks for watching. Those of you that continue to watch, I do appreciate it. As you'll know, this is going quite slow at the moment. I'm thinking through a lot of the problems that I'm having getting this to be situated properly, and logistical issues like where to put the diff and the drive shafts. I've been thinking through that for the last 3 or 4 days, and the only option was to move the engine further forwards. Now, if you can see that, there's not an awful lot of clearance there between the cross member and the oil filter. However, I will be looking at an oil filter relocation kit, or removing the oil cooler and putting one elsewhere, instead of being sandwiched to the block, so that it moves the oil filter further back. Failing that, I'll look up shallow oil filters that will fit and that will work to get around that problem. What I've done so far is I've moved the engine about 2 inches further forwards, with the scope of being able to move another 2 to 3 inches further forwards if needed. And I've also tilted the engine upright slightly. It's not a massive amount. It's maybe 5 degrees. So it doesn't quite sit exactly where it was in the motorbike, but it also doesn't sit upright either. So it's still tilted as it should be. But it just gives me a little bit more room to play with. So what I've done is, if you can see here, I've hung the drive shaft up on the strut brace there, just to get it in the right sort of position. Yes, I know the wheels are in the air and they will lift up slightly, but just to get the rough kind of position of where the drive shafts are going to sit. It won't be these drive shafts, but it may be these outers. But the inners will need extending to where the diff sits. But it gives me an idea of where to fit the diff and whether or not a chain will fit in there, a chain sprocket. Now, in my bike parts, I have some chain guides and a couple of brake discs. And initially, I was measuring everything up with this, which is far too big. The sprocket I'm going to be using is going to be a 45 tooth, so it's going to be 14 tooth front sprocket and a 45 tooth rear sprocket, which will give me the correct gearing for about 128 miles an hour flat out. That's 12,000 RPM in sixth will be 128. So it does gear the bike down. I've measured it for the 15-inch wheels with these tyres on, and the gearing of the ZX9R gearbox, and it does gear out 1445, which is a perfect gear ratio. And what I've measured is a 45 tooth sprocket is between these two sizes. So what I've done, I've used the bigger of the two, which is this one here, which I believe is 165 mil, 170 mil, something like that. I can't remember. So it's a brake disc off a mountain bike, and what I've done, I've gone down here and aligned the brake disc up with the rear sprocket, which is just there. That's the rear sprocket there. I've taken the cover off, obviously, so I can line it up, and then I've moved it back as far back as I can get it, and then measured the drive shafts. The problem is the drive shafts would rub the chassis at this point. So what I'd need to do is move this further forwards. Now, I don't want them anywhere near each other to be able to clash or anything like that. So to get them close without clashing, I would be about here. That will give me plenty of room to the firewall. There's masses of room there. However, that's not the major issue. The issue is lining the drive shafts up. Now, if we follow this string along at the bottom there, through the centre of the brake disc, it gives me a gap of about 2 mil. So I will need to move the diff and the chain back by a good 3 or 4 mil. Now, yes, it is going to be very close with the drive shafts. However, I don't see that being a massive problem. Sorry, I'm just staring at that bolt there. I don't see that as a massive problem because, like I say, there is a little bit more clearance once the car is on its suspension. As you can see, this here, it does go in slightly at the top there, and the drive shaft normally sits about here. So I could probably illustrate that a little better with the other drive shaft if I can reach the sodding thing. Oh, here we go. Right, so say if the drive shaft was to sit here, like so, and that's the rear sprocket there. So if I put a diff in there with a sprocket on it, it lines up and there's a gap. So that is perfectly fine. There's enough of a gap there for a decent sized sprocket, which would be 45, and a diff. So no problems there at all. And then obviously I can drop that back down again. So they do roughly line up, and then we'll sort out the minutiae after. What else have I done? Well, if you can see the front of the engine there's no vertical brace anymore, and there's no wraparound brace either. They will be getting remade, and they will be getting put back on, but a little bit better welded, and probably in one piece as well. So don't worry about that bit. That's been taken off for a reason. The reason being, obviously, because the engine had to move forwards. These bolts have gone from the rear 2 bolts, which is where I had it before, to the front 2 bolts, and because this is pivoted on the engine but not in the chassis, I've had to remove this bar to move the engine forwards because the bar came right close to the cylinder head. So I've removed it so I can slide the engine further forwards. And then this side, this is the old mount that I made up to hold the engine in place, and it did the job. It got me the measurements that was needed, so that will be cut up and used again for bracing. And this side here, I've removed the rubber mount. I will be removing the rubber mount off that side as well, so it will be hard mounted. I'm just, yeah, the engine sinks and sags too much on the rubber mount, so it's going to be hard mounted. It won't be welded to the chassis; it will be bolted. So there is some adjustability and options to remove the engine should I need to, and when I need to. What do we have on here then? Well, what I've done, I've made 2 new spacers up out of old wheel nuts. So the aluminium wheel nuts that I've just cut up. This one here was 30mm and that one was 20mm in order to get an equal gap along this side with this 3mm plate. I may double this up, but it may be strong enough because it's actually in shear. So it's the strength of that plate is trying to twist the plate. You won't twist 3mm plate with an engine, so and it's not moving side to side at all. Plus, it's going to be braced at the front anyway, so it is literally just there to tie those two mounting points together. They are now bolted in, and it's a much neater solution than the previous one. It gives me a lot more room down here to get like headlight bulbs out and stuff, and a socket on the bottom of this bolt. I've put a bolt through here. Used part of one of the other braces to and drill through it to bolt here, which I'll put a spacer here and a spacer there to center that and then clamp it together. And then here I've welded this bar to the 3mm plate. I don't know if you can see there, my welding's getting better. That there, and there's a little blue mark on the back of the plate as well, so it's penetrated. That there is probably the best weld I've ever done. Is this little section here, and then I went a little bit too quick on this side and it spattered a bit, but that's as solid as it's going to get. It's welded all the way around and it's solid. I keep saying solid, but it is. There's no other word for it. It is attached and affixed. It is now one homogeneous piece of metal. That isn't. That's really bad welding on there, but that was because it was an edge, and I couldn't really see. Me welding mask decided to run out of battery, and it just dimmed. So I was trying to see flip it up and see, and then lower it back down like a normal mask, and I just couldn't see anything. So, but that is attached. It's welded up this side and welded up the back side as well. Not very well, but again, it's just attached for the minute. I will be taking all this off and welding it properly. It's welded at the bottom. This is welded here as well. I've cut a V in this bar and then welded it to the crossbar that goes along the back of the engine. Here, I will be making another mount in there, so I'll put a 3mm plate on here to spread the load on the chassis rail, and then drill a hole through it and mount it with a big bolt, so that it's then bolted to the chassis rail. So you've got, on this side, you'll have two mounts. You'll have this one here and this one here, which will tie in the back of the engine and the side of the engine and the back of the engine, and then on that side you'll have the one mount at the front, and then possibly another mount that comes, because that rubber mount there will be getting replaced. I'll cut this off and or even weld a flat plate on here and bolt it to either side of the original rubber mount. So although the rubber mount's still in there, it's going to be bolted to solid steel, and then obviously mount a bar from here to the cross member or from here to the chassis rail, just to brace that. So there'll be two on this side and two on that side, and then you've still got this bar going to the firewall there, which is stopping the fore and aft movement. And then you've got there will be two mounts under. Once I've got it all located, like I said in the last couple of videos, there will be mounts under the engine as well, which will be there with the diff cradle, and it'll all be tied together. The diff cradle will then be bolted to the firewall, which will the whole thing will be completely braced. I've just noticed a crack in me cam cover as well, just there where somebody dropped it. Hopefully that's not going to cause an issue, but I don't think these cam covers are very expensive. I think the magnesium as well, but anyway, that's not a problem for now. That's a problem for later. And that's pretty much it so far. I've had another go at welding these all the way around while the engine was being moved around, so they're a bit stronger now. The other thing I need to do, the two little fillets I made for here to bolt through the back of the engine, you can see this hasn't moved, and that's how far I've moved the engine, so it's a good couple of inches. So I'll knock, when I take this brace off to weld it fully, I'll knock those bars off, and then make two more that come off the top and the side and go down to the mount at the back there. They only need to be thin for the moment, because once the cradle's in there, the cradle will then have more plates either side with the all thread going through as well, so it'll triangulate from here to go to the firewall and here to go to this crossbar. And I think that's pretty much it for now. It's a nice short sweet video. Like I say, if anybody has any idea what any of these plugs do, if you've got a Haynes manual for a ZX9R, or if you have a list or any ideas on what electrical components can be removed, what I might need that would make it work, like kickstand switch and starter button on the hand controls, and I know it needs a stator and a cover down here. Yes, I'm aware it's open at the minute and it's usually filled with oil, so that will be... Is it filled with oil? It might be filled with grease, but anyway, there's normally a gasket on there and a seal and a cover, so that's already been priced up. They're about 80 quid, and that will get replaced. Yeah, that's where I am right now. So yeah, like I say, if you've got any suggestions, please feel free to either PM me or whatever they call it now, DM me, message me, do whatever you want, contact me. I've got a Facebook page as well, which is listed as the Maxi ZX9R Maxi Micra project. Likes on there, and a few pictures of when it was turbocharged, and the previous attempt at putting like an SR20 in it, which didn't go very well, and the other two engines that have been in here since I've owned it. All those pictures are on there. Pictures of me replacing the front cross member and that kind of stuff. So I'll be putting up videos on Facebook as well as YouTube. I do have a Patreon account which I'll link to below if anyone wants to support the build, then I would appreciate that absolutely. However much you want to support, whether it be a quid or whatever you want to, then I'll be appreciative of that, and it will go straight towards getting this build done. Yeah. So from my end, if you'd like to subscribe and like to the YouTube channel, and I will pick you up next time when I've done a bit more welding. Thank you very much.